Put a couple of holiday songs together for you. This is one. Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock. Jingle bells ring and jingle bells ring. And blowing on the bushels of fun. Come on, Santa. Now the jingle hop has begun. Jingle bell rock. Jingle bells chime, jingle bells high. Dancing and prancing in Jingle Bell Square. In the frosty air.
Feel free to sing along.
You guys can read the words today, huh?
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. Oh, it won't be long. You're gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have feelings, you will tomorrow. For no one can feel those other needs that you won't get shown. Just walk on your love, keep your hand. You need somebody to lean on. I have a problem, understand. We all need somebody to lean on. When you're not strong, I'll be young guy. I'm very privileged to meet him. I found this so randomly and ended up finding great people as well. And he was one of them, so. Andy?
Hey! Good morning, everybody. Yeah, the rumors are true. I'm Andy. Thanks for coming out today. This is great. Here we are all getting together just to celebrate the inherent decency of being a human being. I find that great. Thanks to Bill Hathaway for leading us through a seasonal favorite that proves that you don't have to have God or on Christmas to have great music and just enjoy the season. We do want you all to join in and sing. This is here for you. This is to be happy and be excited and be involved and to establish a community here. Thanks to Brandon Tucker for singing "Lean on Me." And I'm happy to be your host today. We have some real good speakers, and it's great to be here. I remember when I first heard about Sunday Assembly, and I'm not going to go too far down that hole right now, but hey, the band's pretty good, huh? Aren't these guys great? We're really lucky to have a lot of talent, not just in the band, in the whole community, and all of us who have been putting this together. And almost everybody's in this room. Jessica couldn't make it today because she was very, very sick, but she's been a really key person. And I don't want to start naming names because then you don't know where to start. You know, who did you leave out? But now I have some announcements, and I'll try not to be too boring about it because we're going to be excited about just being alive and how good that is. For January, we are still venue shopping, I believe.
Venue shopping's on hold right now.
Okay. So this great place that we have right now, this is obviously an old church, and now it's an art gallery and a tattoo parlor, which I think is a great example of repurposing a facility. And there's a Steeler game today. Go Steelers! They win today, and they secure a wild card playoffs. And if they beat Cincy next week, then they win the division. So I know some of us are excited about that, and that's on your mind. We'll get you out in time to watch the game. So, a very little bit about Sunday Assembly. A couple years ago, a couple comedians in England, Pippa Evans and Samson Jones, just kind of said, what if we sort of got together like the church, but just really almost ignored religion, just got together as people and made a point of being nice to each other for an hour a month. That can't be wrong, can it? It's kind of too simple. And me personally, about 9 months ago, I saw the Morgan Spurlock video, where he sort of checked out a bunch of different churches and a bunch of different religions. And one of them was Sunday Assembly. And it really kind of compelled me. I was still sort of coming out myself at the time. And I have a lot of announcements, so I'm going to try not to ramble. You guys, tell me if I'm rambling, okay? All right. Just a little bit more about myself. I drive for Uber right now is what I do for a living. It's pretty cool. I was brought up one of the only Christian families in a Jewish neighborhood, so, scratched my head a little bit. And then we moved to another neighborhood, and we were the only Protestant family in a Catholic neighborhood. And all the other kids had CCD, and I'm like, if it's important, why is there such a lack of consensus on the matter? And so I studied religion and philosophy in college, and really just this past year has been kind of big for me. I came out to my parents as kind of a humanist. But at Sunday Assembly, this is kind of a big one. We emphasize values more than labels. Call yourself an atheist, a humanist, an agnostic, any combination thereof. It's the things we value, community. The motto, well, there's kind of two mottos. There's sort of a three-part motto of live better, help often, and wonder more. Lauren, you're so good with the timing. And sort of the singular motto is celebrate the one life we know we have. And I think that's something very solid that we can really build on. Just going through announcements, the parking outside, it sort of says you can't park there, but nobody's ever had any trouble parking there. So just sort of a disclaimer. As some of you may have seen in our newsletter, if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, there's plenty of places online and toward the where you walk in the building. A little desk there. It shouldn't be any problem for us to stay in touch with each other and be involved with each other because of all of that stuff. We can get each other's email addresses. You can check out our Facebook page, etc. We had announced at the first one that there would be a media-free zone. If you've seen our newsletter, logistically and just in discussions, it was decided that we didn't think we'd really be able to promise that. So that kind of is no more. We have a canned food drive. Did anybody see that? Did anybody bring any canned goods? Thank you so much if you did. Because that's absolutely part of what we are about. It's not just about us and making ourselves feel good. We really want to be a positive part of the larger community, even among believers. Everybody is welcome here. Christian, Jewish, Muslim, anybody is welcome. And we're not going to knock on you for your belief system, even if we ourselves don't prescribe to that. And I just got a couple more things, and then we'll get going, and you can see somebody else's face up here. The charter for Sunday Assembly is online, and we have hard copies at the front of the door where you walked in. This is our winter solstice celebration. It's December, and our guest speaker is going to get into much greater depth about the origins of why people celebrate this, this period of December 22nd, 25th, and so forth. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I really don't have much else right now. So now, without any further ado, I would like to ask you to please very warmly welcome our wonderful guest speaker, Peter Swarto. A few things about him. He's going to talk about, as we sort of mentioned, mankind's earliest celebrations surrounding the winter solstice. He's a local technology professional, a backgammon player, a craft beer enthusiast. We should hang out. And you're married with 2 children, and you're all non-believers. Okay. And your talk itself is on the non-Christian origins of Christian customs. So please put your hands together. Please provide a very, very warm welcome for our special guest speaker, Peter Swarto.
Sunday Assembly. My name is Peter Swarto, which means Blackwood for those of you who don't speak Dutch. Some of this first slide, Andy already touched on. I like to play backgammon a lot. I do enjoy me good ale and beer. I'm certainly not an expert, but I appreciate it, especially the local beer culture, which is growing like crazy in Pittsburgh. Father of 2, my kids Max and Miranda are actually here today, which is really awesome. Husband of 1, Dario, my wife, has also been to Sunday assemblies before this. I am an atheist. I was, like many of you, I'm sure I was raised Christian. In my 20s, I began to question some of the things that I had been taught as a child, and on into my 30s, I pretty much just didn't care. Religion wasn't that big of a part of my life, and now I'm pretty much an out atheist, and I'm transitioning from a personal belief atheist into more of a movement atheist, whatever that means. There's many varieties of what that is. One thing that I am not
is a historian. So just to set your expectations, I am basically just a generally curious person who knows how to run a Google machine. So there's absolutely nothing I'm going to talk about today that you couldn't find out for yourself. And please do check my work. I encourage that. One thing I wanted to mention, though, before I get into the Christian side of things is, hey, today's the winter solstice. This is, to an atheist, today is New Year's Day. And I thought, since we're all a bunch of free thinkers and rationalists here, I thought I'd start off with a science slide. Just real quickly, for those of you who don't really understand why we have seasons, it's because the Earth is tilted on its axis. We don't go around the sun in a straight up and down line. We're tilted. And because we live in the northern hemisphere, we are at the point now where we have the least amount of solar radiation touching the Earth. And in the southern hemisphere, it's the exact opposite. So they are now in their summer, and it's exactly reversed 6 months from now. While we're on the subject, there is a new thing around called secular solstice. And I'm going to bring this up again at the end because if anyone is interested, there's a guy named Raymond Arthur who started this with a Kickstarter, believe it or not, last year. And they raised over $7,000 through Kickstarter to start a new winter holiday for non-believers that celebrates exactly what I just said, the new year. It celebrates the seasons and the wonderful world that we live in. There's a lot of music and singing, and I want to bring this up again at the end to see if there's anybody who might be interested in working with me to bring secular solstice to Pittsburgh. So what exactly is it that makes the winter holidays so awesome? As I said before, I was raised Christian, so Christmas to me is a very fond childhood memory. So I'm afraid this talk is going to be a little bit slanted towards Christmas. I do have a slide at the end that's not Christmas. But really what my theme of this talk is really not so much about Christmas as it is about celebration. These holidays are wonderful, and there's really nothing wrong with celebrating traditions that have been around for 3,000 years. They really have, and one of the things that you're going to learn is a lot of these traditions really don't have a religious background. They're things that just feel good. What's not to like about the Christmas holidays? There's decorating, there's candles, there's decorating your houses, there's a lot of eating, a lot of food is always involved, a lot of drinking is always involved, and hanging out with your friends. So let's take a look at some of the wonderful customs that make this season special. What exactly is it that is so special about this? People getting together and doing outrageous things. It's families having fun together. It's people taking time off from work. That's really what's at the heart of these holidays. It's getting together with your friends and doing things you don't normally do. Now, I mean, not everybody really agrees with me that this is a great time of year. Some people would really it's just really just a bit too much. But I think for most of us, it really is a nice time of year if we just don't let it get us too stressed out. One of the things that I really love about the holidays is the decorating aspect. And this is actually one of the most ancient customs that still survives to this day. And we're going to cover that in great detail later. But really, when you think about it, this time of year in the northern hemisphere, it's dark outside. There's not a lot of light, and it's a little bit cold. The trees have dropped their leaves, which is awesome. So we bring greenery into our homes. It just kind of makes sense. We bring color into our homes because there's not a lot of color around us in nature. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Christmas tree specifically and where it came from. It's really hard to say exactly when the custom of bringing boughs and berries into our homes began because it's so old. But it's definitely at least 600 BC. There's actual recorded references to people bringing things into their homes. The practice of Christmas trees didn't come along until much later. The pagans celebrated this festival called Saturnalia, and we're going to talk about that in more depth in just a minute. But one of the big deals with Saturnalia was decorating your homes with boughs and trees from nature, bringing nature into your homes. The notion of Christmas trees originated with the Germans, and this was a religious thing. The Feast of Adam and Eve in the 17th century they had these trees that they called Paradisbaum. Was I even close? No. And it had something to do with Adam and Eve. In this country, it was brought to America by Germans, by German immigrants. It wasn't really popularized in this country until 1850, and some historians think that coincides with President Pierce was the first president to actually have a Christmas tree in the White House. Today, of course, Christmas trees are everywhere. They're entirely secular. They can't be entirely secular. We're all non-believers in my family. We have a wonderful Christmas tree at home, and it's a great ritual that we go through every year to decorate the tree. Like everything in life, no good thing can go without objections. And there have been objections all through history to the practice of decorating. As far back as 300 or 400 BC in the Old Testament, people were exhorted not to do this. Don't decorate your homes with bells. And my personal feeling is because it's pagan. And pagan stuff isn't right, according to the church. And as far as I can tell, that was really the only real objection to doing this, is because it was the wrong religion. Some atheists don't like it because, hey, they're Christmas trees. So if you look at it as a Christmas thing as opposed to a secular thing, then you might not like it. Some extreme environmentalists don't like cutting down trees. I'm sort of leaning towards that myself. We have an artificial tree at home, and it's perfectly fine. I object to all these objections. Because like I said before, anything that you can do to bring light, color, and life into your home just can't be bad. Even if it might have had religious origins. So that's the way that I feel. All right, and now we've reached the point in the talk where we're going to discuss some things that young children might find slightly disturbing. I think that child is probably a little bit too young for this. So I don't see any problem. And no, it's not what you're thinking. We're going to talk about Saturnalia. This was basically a week-long orgy that was practiced way back in ancient Rome. Actually, I don't see anything particularly. This just looks like a bunch of naked people playing frisbee. Oh yeah, that's the one. Yeah, this is the one. We're talking a week-long orgy. I mean, think Vegas meets Mardi Gras. All over the country. I just love studying this because a lot of these practices survive to this day. It's basically drunkenness and overeating were the rule. Gambling was permitted, which was not normally permitted. They had this weird thing that they did where they reversed roles between masters and slaves. It was like an egalitarian thing. They were celebrating Saturn, who presided over agriculture in ancient Rome. And that was thought to be egalitarian. In other words, the great bounty of nature is equal for all. So masters would serve slaves dinner and sing to them and do things that were normally done the other way around. This began over 2,500 years ago in Rome. There was definitely an aspect of religiosity at first, since it originated as a devotion to the god Saturn, including ritual sacrifice of animals and even humans. The sacrifice practice became less common in later years. Over time, though, the festival spread from being essentially a Rome-centered religious thing to the countryside, where the partying aspect and the eating and drinking and decorating your house aspect took precedence over the religious aspect. And this is, of course, what I love about it and what we still celebrate to this day. This is pronounced Yo Saturnalia, which I just love that, since the word yo means something totally different today. So, decorating your home is obviously still practiced today. Parties are still done today. Drunk people singing outside there's a connection to Christmas caroling, believe it or not. That's documented. And ritual sacrifice leading to mistletoe. I'm going to cover that in just a second here, because I know you don't believe it. Quick side note on the use of December 25th. while we think of Saturnalia as a pagan festival, no wait, I'm sorry, I screwed myself up here. The date of December 25th was essentially created by the church because Saturnalia was so popular. It spread all over Europe. It was a hugely popular festival that coincided with the solstice. That's what it was all about. It was about the end of the year and the bringing of light back to the world. So the church basically just targeted their festival, their holiday, for the same time period. And so that's why December 25th, because it coincides with Saturnalia, which coincides with winter solstice. And so it was a way, basically, to bring people into the church who were essentially pagan, which in my mind means secular. There was definitely a pantheistic aspect to paganism, but primarily people were secular. They just enjoyed the holiday. The word paganos in Latin actually just means country dweller. It means commoner. And we have no reason to believe that the typical pagan of 500 BC was any more religious than the typical Christian of today. This is a very popular practice, giving each other gifts. This originated during Saturnalia. Families gave each other gifts. And they were also given as a sacrificial thing, given to the elders as part of the Saturnalia festival. Caroling is really interesting. There were these things called the waits that were essentially beggars that would go from house to house singing in exchange for food and drink. Many people today have heard of the concept of wassailing, which is very similar, but is a little different. Wassailing was essentially a cooperation between landowners and peasants in the countryside, and this was all prearranged. The peasants would go in a group to the door of a wealthy landowner. They would dress up in outlandish costumes, and they would perform skits and sing songs. And in exchange, they were given beer. I mean, wassail is basically beer. I'd like to read to you what the original recipe was. It was a drink made of mulled ale, curdled cream, roasted apples, eggs, cloves, ginger, nutmeg, and sugar. It sounds delicious, right? It sounds like eggnog to me. So these people would actually sing and perform skits in order to get this stuff. There was another form of wassailing that I think is interesting enough to bring up called orchard visiting wassailing. This was a little different. This was in parts of Europe where they grew fruit trees. Bands of people would band together and would go from orchard to orchard. And I can't say I'm not making this up. They would put wassail-soaked toast on the trees to coax the trees into giving a good harvest. Now, to me, this is just a waste of good beer. But this is what they did, and they just had these practices. Now, you can argue among yourselves whether they really believed this, that it was going to, but it was just something that was fun to do, and they did it year after year. Here's one of the songs that was sung during that period. Wassail the trees that they may bear you many a plum and many a pear. For more or less fruits they will bring, as you do give them wassail. Christian carols came over here. It was a much later thing, 400 AD, and the American practice of going door to door with caroling is a Victorian thing. So that it was. I don't really know that much about the evolution of caroling from Saturnalia to Victorian. But I had to throw this slide out here because Sunday Assembly is so much about music, and there's just so much great secular music out there. We have been listening. My family's. We've been listening to. We like Spotify. We've been listening to, Spotify has a whole bunch of secular, seasonal secular music that we've been listening to. Pandora does too. And I greatly encourage you. You're gonna hear all these songs on all of these things, I guarantee it. And isn't it nice how some of these songs were written by famous freethinkers? So, mistletoe is one of those things that traditionally in Europe was brought into the home to decorate along like boughs and berries, as I was saying. But there really is evidence that mistletoe was cooked into a tea and given to sacrificial victims. I think basically to drug them, so that they wouldn't fight. I told you this was bad for kids. And then they were ritually killed under the influence of mistletoe poisoning. But that's a very extreme case. Mistletoe basically is a decorative thing, and the practice. I actually couldn't find how that evolved into the practice of getting kissed under the mistletoe, but I did find one really quaint story in England where they would hang mistletoe over the door, and mistletoe has red berries on it. There's green leaves and red berries. And they would pick one red berry off every time somebody kissed. And when you got to where there were no more red berries, there was no more kissing. That was done. Today, though, we have a modern alternative to this ancient practice of hanging mistletoe over the door. It's the mistletoe drone. This is a real thing. This was pioneered in TGI Fridays. Very few of them. I think it was a trial thing. It was a beta. And it was featured on the Colbert Report, which is the only reason that I know about it. And now, we really have reached the point in the program where we're going to talk about things that parents of young children might want to take them out for just a minute and do something else. Because we're going to talk about the big guy. The one on the left there really is kind of like a local craft beer that I recommend very highly. It's delicious. It's made right here in Pittsburgh, and you can only get it during this time of year. So yeah, that's St. Nicholas there on the left. I didn't realize that St. Nicholas needed corrective lenses, but apparently he did. So the story of Santa Claus is actually very, very interesting. And Santa Claus, as he's practiced today, is basically entirely secular. And I'm going to get to that in just a minute. The original Santa Claus was called St. Nicholas. It can be traced back hundreds of years to a monk named St. Nicholas. It's believed that Nicholas was born sometime around 280 AD in what is now Turkey. Much admired for his piety and kindness, it is said that he gave away all of his inherited wealth and traveled the countryside helping the poor and the sick. In Holland, his name morphed into Sinterklaas, and there are some interesting customs that go with Sinterklaas. Dutch immigrants to this country brought Sinterklaas with them when they came over here, and they started their own little festival, a yearly festival, to honor St. Nicholas's memory. This was highlighted in a book called The History of New York by Washington Irving, and this is where we get some of the customs that are now associated with Santa Claus, like coming down the chimney. But the way that we really think of Santa Claus today is the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, which we know of as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. And this poem was written by Clement Moore, who was not himself agnostic, but the poem is entirely secular. And these are all the things that we now associate with Santa Claus, the giving of gifts, the coming down the chimney, and all of those things that we love to tell our kids. There's an interesting variant on this. In Northern Europe, St. Nicholas Day is a big thing. This happens on December 6th. It's not practiced very much here in this country. Traditional celebrations included gifts left in children's shoes. And this is where American Christmas stockings come from. I think that's cool. Good children receive treats, while naughty children receive lumps of coal. In Germany, children still put a shoe outside their bedroom doors on the eve of St. Nicholas Day. And in the Netherlands, they put their shoes in front of their chimneys in hopes of finding chocolate or a small toy in the shoes in the morning. Okay, I couldn't do an entire talk all about Christmas. So I found that the dreidel, which of course is, we Christians, Christian origin, people associate with Hanukkah, is actually secular in origin. It comes from Germany. It was originally called a teetotum, and this was essentially a gambling game. You would spin this top, and whatever side came up, that's what you would do. You would either ante into the pot, there was a pot of money, you would ante into the pot, or you would take some out, or you would take the whole thing, And this then became part of the Hanukkah celebration, and they even come up with a clever acronym with the NGHNS, which has a religious meaning in the Jewish faith. So there is so much celebrating to do. I would like to know if anybody in the audience who is hearing this, whoops, okay, well, we'll jump to the next slide. I meant to sit on that one slide. There's no convenient way to go back with the mouse. Scroll down. Yay. I'm sorry, I meant to mention this at the beginning and I completely forgot. If anyone would like to share a story or a particular tradition that you practice, and you know a little bit about the origin of it, and I didn't cover it today, please feel free to share, because I want to know more about this, and I know I only just scratched the surface. Yeah, see, I should have brought it up at the beginning. That way people would have been thinking about it through the whole thing. But if you think about it, let me know, because I actually am really interested in this kind of stuff. Back to the secular solstice. If anyone is interested in this concept, please see me afterwards, because I think this is wonderful. And the guy who started this, Raymond Arthur, the next step for this is to spread it across cities across the U.S. And why not Pittsburgh? I think it's a great idea. It involves a lot of singing and a lot of people telling stories about their year and things that went badly, things that went well, and what the things that they want to give up. Sort of like the end of the year and the beginning of the new year. And I just want to read you a couple of things that are from the Kickstarter website about secular solstice. When we sing together, we forget ourselves and find a sense of belonging. Boy, does that sound like Sunday Assembly. Just as there is no God to put a limit on suffering, there is no God to put a limit on the good that we can do. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of Sunday.
All right, let's hear once more for Peter. You always think of a couple other things to say when someone else is talking. The crowd keeps growing here. Our community keeps growing, and that's really a wonderful thing. Just we get caught up in a lot of the little details, what it takes to put this together. But it's very, very clear to me that we're really doing something for people here. And anyways, thank you so much for coming. It means a lot to us, and we've got a few more things before we call it quits for today, for the month. Next, I would like to welcome up for our poetry reading my friend, Ann Norman, and she is going to read a very, very popular seasonal favorite called How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
I mean this very secularly, but I love it. But the kids might like it too. It's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. So, every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch who lived just north of Whoville did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, Grinchy frown at the worm-lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early. They'd rush for their toys, and then, oh, the noise. Oh, the noise, 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 noise. That's one thing he hated, the noise, 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 noise. Then the Who's, young and old, would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, 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 feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Who's would start singing. Ba-hoo, bore, welcome Christmas, Christmas Day. And they'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. For 53 years I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea, an awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat. Then he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat, and he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I look just like St. Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around. But since reindeer are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max, and he took some red thread and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, get up! And the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Who's lay a snooze in their town. All their windows were dark. Quiet snow filled the air. All the Who's were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square. This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once for a moment or two, then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present, pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums. Then he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimbley. Then he slunk to the icebox and took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding, he took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took the last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. And now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. And the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small Who. Little Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why? But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick, he thought up a lie and he thought it up quick. Why, my sweet little tot, the fake Santa Claus lied. There's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, and I'll bring it back here. And his fib fooled the child, and he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then the last thing he took was the log for their fire. Then he went to the chimney himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire, and the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 15:15 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze when he packed up his sled, packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-pooh to the who's, he was grinchiously humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a moment or two. Then the who's down in Whoville will all cry, hoo-hoo. Excuse me. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put a hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. Ba-hoo, bore, welcome Christmas, Christmas Day. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, this sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so. But it was merry, very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast.
Thanks, Ann. That was great. And I think all of a sudden, Bill, Andy, Dave, I'm going to come back up here. We have a song that is perfectly appropriate to follow up that poetry reading. Give us just 1 second to get our instruments.
Your heart's
overflowing with the most disgraceful assortment of deplorable rubbish imaginable, mangled up and tangled up. You nauseate me, Mr. Grinch, with the nauseous super knob. You're a crooked jerky jockey, and you drive a crooked horse, Mr. Grinch. You're a three-decker sauerkraut and toadstool sandwich with arsenic sauce.
All right, thanks a lot for that. And again, thanks to the band. These guys are awesome. It's great to just see our numbers flowing. I'm sorry, it's just still coming out. Anyways, our next segment is kind of called X is Doing Their Best. It's where one of us just sort of gets up and really has something really especially positive to share. And we're absolutely definitely about positivity. And so Brittany is going to come on up, and please give her a very warm welcome. She's one of our original founding people, and she's been awesome throughout the entire.
Okay, in light of this, even though you said this is, doing our best and it all being about positive, with this being winter solstice, I wanted to actually touch on, light and dark, both the positive and the negative, being a little bit more realistic. And of course, X doing their best to elaborate a bit on this. So, my life right now, in my eyes anyways, has been progressively getting worse. The past few years, just whenever I think something else couldn't make it worse, it does. I feel that there's no possible way it could suck more, and yeah, it does. Between family, jobs, cars, house, loans, you name it. Yet somehow, I've made it through it, and I continue to push forward. And even with all this darkness surrounding me, I have found those little bright spots this year. This year I got married to my best friend of 9 years, and he couldn't make this month, but he'll definitely be here next month. This year I committed to a healthier way of eating and have actually lost a notable amount of weight because of it. This year I have, despite all of my job frustrations, have started a full-time job actually this week at the company my husband works for, and we can actually carpool with our one car. So that's extremely awesome. And of course, this year I have found and helped build an amazing community who accepts me for me. So thank you guys. So this year has been both the best, the worst and the best year for me so far in my life. I'm still here doing the best I can with what I have at this point in time. And I have to remind myself that every day. And I think that that's something that everybody should remind themselves of.
Thank you very much, Brittany. I too have found a lot of, a great sense of community with this group. So I know what you're talking about, and I'm sure a lot of these people do. In case you're wondering, we rotate the host duties. This is the first time I've been host, and no single person can be host more than twice in a year, 4 times in a year, 3 times on Saturday.
It's 6 of the host, speaker, leader, 6 of those in a year.
Yeah, it's something that's rotated. It's certainly not any sort of call of personality. So I won't be here every time, lucky for you. All right, our next moment is the moment of candle lighting.
We're mixing it up a little bit this month. Instead of a moment of reflection, Aaliyah's going to lead us in an interesting candlelight ceremony.
Yeah.
much like church, and that's totally fine. You don't have to participate. You're welcome to. I learned about this ritual at Girl Scout camp. Yeah, that's right. We did the candlelight ceremony at the end of every week at camp, and we had a pool there, and we had floating candles, and it was very picturesque. I'm sorry we couldn't get the pool put in time. But this was so meaningful to me as a camper and then later as a staff member at Girl Scout camp that Bethany and I actually did at our wedding a few months ago. And it's a ritual in the sense of team building exercise. Just a way to feel a sense of community for a moment and pause and really dwell in that. So what we're going to do, Kara is passing around the candles, and if you would like to participate, I'm going to ask you guys to get up and get in a circle around the room. Watch for the wires over here. And whoever is Andy and Bethany, would you mind hitting those light switches that are behind you? See how much darker that makes it? Not much. All right, we'll work with that. And we will be going just a little bit long today. Sorry about that, guys, but I think it'll be worth it. All right. Does everybody who wants to participate have a candle? All right. So I'm going to start with a little poem. A candle's but a simple thing. It starts with just a bit of string. Yet dipped and dipped with patient hand, it gathers wax upon the strand. Until complete and snowy white, it gives at last a lovely light. Life seems so like that bit of string. Each deed we do, a simple thing. Yet day by day, on life's strand, we work with patient heart and hand. It gathers joy, makes dark days bright, and gives at last a lovely light. Which I thought was particularly appropriate for solstice, the darkest day of the year. We're going to have to ask you guys to use your imaginations here. All right? All around us is darkness. It's very dark. I like this little candle. And it is no longer dark. Although this is a tiny flame, and it lights only a small area, all of us can see it. Each one of us knows it's here, and can find the way to it. Though tiny, it is a beacon to every one of us. This tiny light can grow, it can be multiplied and spread, if someone would come to join us. Now the flame is brighter, lights a bigger area, and we can see more than before. But this is only a beginning, for once there is light and people who are willing to share it, it will grow. As it is shared, it will become bigger and bigger until all who want it can have the light.